Hello and welcome to the stream. We're picking up where we left off yesterday, but I just realized I didn't actually share the repo. Naughty Steve. Here it is. You can see it on the screen. I'm streaming in a slightly lower quality today because I kept having kind of network issues where the stream would kind of cut out a little bit. So I'm testing it at high definition instead of 1080p. So hopefully it's a better experience. So you can go to the repo here, github.com/juststeveking/todo-app. Go check it out, clone it, use it, drop comments and issues saying that, Steve, you're useless, why are you doing this? But yeah, let's look to get started, I think. We've got our repo here, we've got our code here, and we've got Insomnia over here allowing us to send requests. I'm going to dive in and just focus on the code because we want to make sure that comes through with a slightly lower stream pixels. So yeah, I have a quick mouthful of coffee and we'll dive in. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. Right, where we got to last time, we were able to get a list of tasks, but we want to focus on the authentication today. So we know we can log a user in, but we want to be able to do more than that, right? We want to be able to say, okay, I want to create a new account because it is so focused around just being an API where you're bringing your own UI. We want to make sure we've got the ability to kind of perform most actions through the API. What I would do is come down to roots quickly, and now I can zoom in. What I'm going to do is just quickly come over to the appearance, and where is it? System settings. I want like the font stuff. Where's the fonts hiding? Where are we going? Where are we using custom font? Yeah, okay, I'll use a custom font. I am going to use, have I got JetBrains Mono? Yes, I do. I'm going to go for this. We're going to size 18. Bang, a bit bigger. Perfect. You should be able to see that more now. So we can log in. We want to register. Let's go add that. Roots. We wanted a post request to register. I give this a name as we always do. Register. So that is the beginning. What I'm going to do is just name this to server, and I'm going to call this artisan just to keep myself organized. So in our controllers, I mean, this, I don't think I'm ever going to use this. So I'm just going to delete that because it's never going to be used. Auth, we've got login controller here, nice and simple. What I want to do is just make sure that I add some doc blocks, things. So I've got auto completion and things are making sense. I'm just going to close the terminal because I don't need it. So we can come here and say, okay, we want to create a new registration controller. Now, this, again, needs to be invocable. I like invocable controllers. It works how I organize things in my head. It may not work for you, so don't feel you have to do this if you are following along. Registration controller. Now, let's simplify that. A make request. Registration request. Put that back down, come over to here, and we can pull that in. Registration request as request. We can come over to here, clean this up in the way that we like to. Don't need that because that is not the way we like to do things. So when we register, we open up our user model quickly. We want a name, email, and a password. That's like the main things that we need, right? So we know we need a name. It's going to be required. Should be a string, minimum length of 2, and a maximum length of 255, so we don't overflow that bar carve-outs in the database. Email. I've been writing too much JavaScript recently. Again, this is required. It should be an email and rule unique on table users under column email. We want our password. We want this to be required. It could be a string, and we can just use password default. I'm just going to go for the default for now. We're not overly focused on a lot of these things. So if we click through, default callback is over here. Defaults. Where is it actually registered? Where it tells you what they are. Required sometimes. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm not sure where that's actually defined, but I know that you do that. That's all I care about right now. Okay, so let's add this, and we're going to say that we're returning a string with an array. That array is going to be int string. But returns jump that. So we can just kind of fix that up there. We've already got that pulled in, so we can do that. And we can also do that. Pull that as well. So there we go. We've got everything that we might need. I'm just going to turn my fan on. If the noise gets annoying for anyone listening, please let me know. Hopefully, my mic won't pick it up. Okay, that is so strange. There we go. That was the problem. I'm not going to focus on that too much. It's just going to get silly. So at this point, we know we've validated, right? We know we've got a name, an email, a password, and most likely password confirmation. So let's come here. Let's duplicate this. Register a new user. So we're going to register. Start to get errors, which is great. It's how we want it. Let me remove that so because I don't need it. JSON body here. So we need the name. So name is going to be Steve McDougall. And I'm going to use my work email instead. steve@treblle.com. Password is password. And we're all good. We are passing validation. So at this point, we want to do two things. We know that we have a valid payload. We want to create the user. Then we want to create a token for the user. We want to pass the token back. So that's how our authentication works here. So if you look over here, as you can see, we fail authentication there. We don't do any sort of anything specific other than kind of logging in the user. So here we want to authenticate the user. So this is where we go. We validate the payload. So now we want to turn that payload into something we can use that isn't an array. Because we all hate arrays, right? So typically what I would do, I'd come to HTTP, payloads, v1, auth, and I'd create a new user payload. This would be just a standard PHP class or DTO, whichever way you want to call it, really. But it allows me to be pretty specific. So I say read-only string for name, private read-only string for the email, and we will have a private read-only string for the password. So what we then do, we want to have a way to easily create this. So we have a public static function from request. We pass in an array of data, and this would return a new user. So we can return new user. But here we can use like an array shape, for example. So we can say, we know the shape of this. We're going to have a name, which is going to be a string, an email, which is going to be a string, and a password, which is also going to be a string. So down here, we know that we can say that our name is data. If you watch this part now, if I just open up this, let's press N, we know that it's coming from the array shape. The email, again, data, email coming from the array shape, password, data, coming from the array shape. And that all just works nicely. And I always like to have a toArray method, because while I want to convert it to an object for me to use, I need it to be an array when I'm sending it back to the database. So I want to be able to just like create based on it. So what I do here typically is return an array where the name is this name, email is this email, and password is this password. And what you'll notice is that these should always map to the columns in the database, so that I can easily take a request, turn it into an object using array shapes here to map to what was in the request to what's going to be on the object, then to take what's on the object into the database, do any sort of converting or name conversion that you might need to do within here, and it just keeps everything really clean, really straightforward to use. So what I can do is come to here, and what I like to do is add a public function payload to my my form request, for example. This will return a new user. So I can return new user from request where the data, the name is this string name string. The email is this. I know all the validation rules are all here. I know how that's being converted to everything. And it really keeps everything really organized. And at this point, I use the hash facade to make the password, where I just say the value is this string, password to string. I am so this way, my unencrypted password, my unhashed password, doesn't really leave this class. When I'm interacting with it here, I don't need to know the password anymore. That's all part of the request itself. So in my commands in auth, I can go through and I can say create new user. Function handle. So this will receive a new user of the payload, and it will return a user. I like to use database transactions for this, and to do that, I like to inject the database manager. So I use private read-only database manager. That's the database. I can make that a read-only class now. And what I can do is I can return this database transaction where the callback is a function that will run user query create payload to array. I'm going to attempt that a maximum of twice. Potential errors that could occur. And dog block it up once I've finished with the class. By that, and that is all good. This should return a user. So that in here, I know I'm going to need the user, but I'm also going to need, like I did in my login controller, I also want this factory. So I'm going to grab this factory here and pull it in first. Public function construct. I've got my auth factory here. What I want to do is I need to authenticate this user. But there's multiple commands or actions that I need to do on this. So I need to create a service class because there's so many different things that I need to do. I'm just going to create like an auth service, for example. Public function will construct this. I'm going to have some commands in here. So create new user will be user. Private read-only create token for user will be token. Public function create user. This will have a new user payload. It will return a user. Return this user handle for the payload. Passed in payload like this. This can now be read-only. Just drop this down to here. And I can say public function create token. This is going to return this token handle, where the ID is the ID and the name is the name. So this will be string for the ID and a string for the name. This will return a new access token. And what you'll see is I've got commands and I've now wrapped them in a service class because sometimes I need one, sometimes I need multiple. I can really, I don't know if there's like a name for this. Like typically you'd have a service class, this would call like a repository and it would do stuff. But what I'm trying to do here is just have this nice simple auth service where I can just say, okay, pull in my auth service. So if I come to my auth service, what I want to do, turn the payload into something. So we'll do this long form. So payload is going to be request payload. We want to create the user. Our user is going to be this service create user where the payload is payload. We want to authenticate the user now. So we want to say this auth guard login using ID, where the ID is user ID. We want to create a token for the user. So we can say that our token is service. This service create token. ID is user ID. And the name is string. Looked like I was writing regex for a second there. User agent done. And then this will return something that is responsible. At this point, we can return a new token response where the data is the token and the status is status created. And that's very long form, right? That's kind of not how we want to do it. So what I like to do here, we've got, okay, we can construct something there. We can do create a user. We can do create a token. But what's wrong with having a public function register where it takes in that new user as a payload? A string for the name, and it will return a new access token. We could even pass in factory or pass that in to the auth service itself. So we'll step through this. First, we want our user. This create user where the payload is payload. We've got a user. We then want to log the user in. Then we want to say that our token is this create token where the ID is user ID and the name is name. But we can return this here. We're just proxying call to our own method so that we can wrap it up a little bit nicer, basically. Nothing overly complicated. So what I think would work well here is if we take this factory and chuck it in the auth service instead. What we could do, update the doc. We've got factory, create user, and all that good stuff. We can just say this auth guard login user ID, user ID. Now, technically, we don't need to, especially if this is stateless, but it's a good practice to get into, I suppose. So over here, I can actually go, actually, I don't need that anymore. I don't need anything of well, I'm going to want to get that. What I can do is I can say that my token is this service register where the payload is request payload and the name is that. And suddenly my code is so much simpler and easier to manage. With a token, I could even say, actually, I just want to make it super simple and do that. Now that, for maybe a less experienced developer, that could be quite confusing to look at. For me, it makes sense. For you, it might not. Don't feel you need to follow this to the letter. So to test it, let's come back to here. We've got a token. Just save that. Now, if I send that again, it's going to fail because the email's already been taken. But I can just say Steve1 at Treblle, and that'll be fine. I'd like to look at validating that because that is a problem that a lot of people face. It's an interesting one, definitely an interesting one. So we've registered. Got a nice, easy way to do that. I think what could be useful is maybe testing. Anybody watching, what would you find useful in the authentication for an application right now? What would be the most useful thing for you to see? I want to make sure that I can create new tasks because my plan tomorrow is to look at integrating with this API. If you have thoughts, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of make something up as I go along. As a side note, this browser is absolutely fantastic. It's called Sigma OS. We can have a look. It's like if Notion made their own browser. I'm glad you're enjoying the stream. So, right, okay. Let's get back to it. That is doing that. Cool. So, let me just close all of these. Git add, git commit, creating a service and registering. Okay, so what I'm going to quickly do is look at refactoring the login. So this is great. This works. This token response is fine. But we've got this in there again when we could just use a service now, right? Auth service is service. Use that. Do that. Use that. What we can do is, actually, no, I'm not going to do that for now. I think I might just be taking a little bit too far. Over engineering, perhaps. Let's not over engineer. Yes, we've got this guard attempt here. We could move that out. Then we've also got this token creation, which we can move out to a central location. Maybe we just say private auth service as service. Down here, we say service, create token, just move it away from the command. So the command is then only ever called from the service itself. We've got reusable classes that we can just kind of play around with and look at improving later down the line in case we ever want to go hexagonal, because we're setting ourselves up for the perfect way to do so. So I can log in, I can register, I can only get my tasks. So I am going to focus on creating tasks and maybe marking tasks as done or that sort of thing, because tomorrow when we integrate, we want some of these API endpoints available. So I will add this and we'll say moving login logic or login token creation logic to auth service. So what we want to do is we want to create tasks. We want to update tasks. Eventually, we're going to want to delete tasks, but right now I'm not too worried about that. Another thing that we know we're going to want to do is we're going to have some meta endpoints for things like statuses and priorities. Because they're PHP enums, we need to make them available. We do heavy caching on them, but we still need to make them available. So let's look at creating a task. We'll do a post task to that endpoint. I like to call this store. Your naming convention may be different, but whatever works for you is the right answer. So I can come here and I can say store controller. This will have an invoke method. And for now, that'll be it while I hook everything up. So we can just say store controller. Like that. Come to our terminal quickly and say, hey, make a request for this. But instead of auth, we're going to say tasks store request. Over here, we can just pull that in. There's a store request as a request. Eventually, we're going to return some sort of responsible object. And then, very similar to what we just did with authenticating, registering, we can start defining out our rules. So if I open up task over here, what we could do is put it on a split view so we can look at what we actually need. Our title is required. Should be a string, minimum of 2, and a maximum of 255. Status is required. Actually, no, it's not. It's nullable. If it is passed, we say enum, and the type, the status. Priority, again, is nullable. Because they have defaults in the database, we can make them nullable quite easily. Rule, enum, where the type is priority. Next, content. Again, I've been writing JavaScript too much. Content. Right now, this is nullable. And when we do pass it, it should be a string. Category. Is required. And it should be a string. Min of 2, max of 255. Completed at, or just let's call it completed. This is nullable, and if it is passed through, it should be date time, I think it is. Let's go to the Laravel docs. .com docs. Available validation or validation. Available validation rules, and there is some sort of date here. We could just say date here. If we do pass it, it should be a date. And that's all we need. The user ID is inferred by the authenticated user. So we can just do that. I'm going to keep it simple this time, string array. I'm not going to focus on that. Store request, so close that down. At this point, we have valid data. Create a payload now. Create the task. Return the task as a response. That is the way we want to go with this. Now, if I was looking at scaling this API or I saw performance issues, I would end up dispatching this to the background to save any sort of kind of slow IOPS that could be happening. I'm not going to have that because this is my own API that I'm going to use for my own stuff. So likelihood is not going to be an issue. So we have valid data. Great. Let's create the payload. So we can come down to our payloads, v1, tasks, say new task. What is passed into this is basically what's on that request. So we can just look at this next to it again and say title, status, priority, content, category, and completed. That's all we care about here. So private, read only, This will make this read only straight away. Say string title in the wrong place. Silly Steve, private string title, private status, private priority, private null string content. So actually this could also be null. This could also be null. So content, private string for the category, and private null, carbon interface as completed. So public static function from request, again, accept an array of data. This is going to return a new task. Return a new task. Title is data title. I'll go do the array shape quickly. So we'll have a title, which is a string. We'll have a status, which is null or status. A priority, which is null or priority. Content, null or string. String completed, which will be null or carbon interface. I'm going to do that elsewhere. So there's my title. Status is data status. Priority is data. Oh, I'm not really typing well today, am I? Priority. Content is data. Content. Category is data. Category. And completed is data completed. Now I'm going to make all of these public this time, because what I want to be able to do is use them in other places. So I'm not going to add the toArray method, because I will interact with this a little bit different. What we want here now is a public function payload, a new task. Then new task from request for the data is this. So our title. Put this back over here now, and we can just focus in on it. So the way we want our title to work. This string title. Next, we're going to have a status. This, if we have status, then we want to say status from the value is this string, this string. Otherwise, return null. a priority. If we have a priority, we grab that because it's painful to write, then you want to say priority from where the value priority, or sorry, this string thing, otherwise null. Next, content. It's string, so that will be content to string. Next, we have got category and then completed. So category, this string, category to string, completed. This has completed. If it is completed, then we will do a carbon pass this string completed string or null. So just a few kind of ternary statements to just decide how that's being loaded in. So hopefully that makes sense. This is how I like to do my ternaries. It works for me. Might not work for you. I mean, you could put on one line like that, which would mean that the indenting isn't as bad. We'll do that for now. Same with that one. There we go. Hopefully it's not too overloading for you, but that's how we can get our payload. So at this point, we can say we have our payload equals request payload. Now we want to create the task. So again, commands auth v1, commands tasks v1. And we're going to say create new task. This will have the database manager injected into it again. Any write operation, I like to do that, unless I'm calling a method through something. And yeah, so database manager as database, public function handle. This should accept a new task as a payload and a string for the user's identifier. This should return a task. So I can say return this database transaction what I'm also going to do, I'm going to also pass in a string for the category identifier, because we're going to hook this up in a little bit. So callback is going to be a function that says task query create, where the title is payload title, where the status is payload status, our ID is payload priority, content is the payload content, category ID is the category, user ID is the user, and complete at is payload completed. I just want to go make sure that's correct. That is all correct. We're going to attempt it twice. So the way this is going to work is slightly different. Well, not 100% different, but different-ish. Let me just replace that. Make that read-only. There's going to be so many different places where we're going to want to interact with managing and creating tasks that we're just going straight for a service at this point. So we can go and create a task service. We can say public function construct, and this is going to have a private read-only create new task as create. So when we say public function create, we say here's our new task. That's the payload. Here's a string for the category. Here's a string for the user. Actually, dropping that. It then returns a task. Bear with me while I make this work in my mind. So we're going to have a public function create category, string name, and string user. Then we'll return a category. So in our commands over here, we want to be able to say create new category. Again, we want the database manager. I'm probably going to look at making that into a trait. So public function handle. We have the string for the name and the string for the user, which returns a category. Turn this database transaction where the callback is going to say category query create. The name is name, and the user ID is that's the user. We're going to attempt it twice. Then do this. Make this read only. That's all good. That is all good. Create new category. We can now grab that. Come back to our task service. Say private as create category. Then this create category handle name user. There. What is going on with my typing? That should return that. Might flow something, might not. So when we go to create this task, we want to turn this create new task handle with a payload is the payload. The user is the user passed through. But the category is this create category. Name is payload category, and the user is user. And then we're going to say get key or issue to the category. So we can then say, please, not that, that's for sure. Name. Then import that at model task. Jobs. So when we go to create this category here, what I'm actually going to say instead is update or create. No, we'll create a new one, I think. Update or create, basically. So we'll create if they don't have one that called that name. Otherwise, we'll just fake an update. There might be a nicer way to do that, but I'm just going to keep it as it is for now, just to kind of keep it easy for me and get to the point, because I don't want to scream for the rest of the day as much as I'd love to. So my store controller. Let's go through and say public function construct. What did I do there? Store controller. There we go. I closed everything by accident. So private, read only, factory for the auth. We're going to want to grab that auth factory. And we're also going to want to get that task service as service. Make both of those read only. So when we want to create a task, we can say that our task equals this service create, but the payload is that payload, and the user is this auth guard ID. What we can do is we can make sure we cast that to a string. And then, have I already created it? Turn new model response. No, I haven't. So I can go create that. What I need in app HTTP responses v1, I want to create a standard model response. What this is going to do is it'll implement responsible, use as response, click function, construct, private. Right. Oh, how am I doing this in other places? That might, is that going to cause an issue? It shouldn't cause an issue. I'm going to make these protected. I'm not sure if a trait will be able to access them. Same with these. So protected read only. It's an API resource data, and protected read only. What's going on? Read only status. Status, but the default is status OK. That is how I need that to work. So in my controller, turn that. Now the data needs to be a new task resource. The resource is the task I just created. And the status is status status created. How can we simplify this? Oh, we can move this to here. And do that. We could move this down to here, but I think that might overcomplicate it just to look at. We want to look at, okay, so we're creating it, then we're returning it, and we're happy with that. So we can create a new task. Excellent. Let's go test it. Tasks. This tasks would duplicate that, and we'll just say create a new task. This will be a post request. The body is going to be JSON. So our title, test task from the API. Our status is going to be open. Our priority is going to be low. Our content is going to be, this is the content of the task group. Category is going to be tests. And I think that's all I want. Integrity constraint, insert into tasks, title, status, priority, content, category, user, complete ID. So, why is foreign key constraint failed? Maybe on the user? Is it something to do with the category? Perhaps. Let's come over to our task service here. And create category, passing through the category name. We want to pass through the category ID. That'll be it. There we go. We've got a category. So test task from the API, low priority, it's open, there's the content of it, whether it's been completed or not, any relationships and all that good stuff. So we know we can now create a task. Fantastic. I'd usually do this TDD, but I want to make sure that we get to the point at the end of these streams. Git commit, creating a new task. Next, we want to look at updating a task, really, don't we? So there's different ways we could do this from a naming perspective. So when we're looking at updating a task, there's certain things we're going to want to update. There's going to be, the standard update, which is, any of the columns, or, there's also, actually, I just want to mark as done, or I want to say change status or update priority. There's a few different ways we're going to want to look at this. Now, if we allow it to update any of the columns through our API, or any of the specified columns through the API, we just have the one endpoint, and I'd call that a kind of, I suppose, a patch request. If we're just marking it as a put request, sorry. But if we're just marking it as done, or just changing the status or updating priority, that would be a patch because we're just patching a part of it. Now, we could just have that one endpoint and keep it simple and allow the integration to control how it controls the logic through that. I think that may be the best approach, but I just wanted to discuss that quickly because there's different approaches you could take. I could say something really simple like, I don't know, I want to say v1 tasks, here's my ID, and I want to update the status. and I'm going to do a quick patch request to that. Same thing could be done for the priority. And the same thing could be done for the completed app. Or we could just do put to this one endpoint. So it really does depend on your API design, what you want to achieve and what the purpose is of each route. All APIs should be designed. We don't just want CRUD on everything because it's sometimes not the best thing to do. It's not easy to integrate with, and it can become quite painful. Because this is just for personal use, I'm going to go for the easy put on all of it, because what we're doing here is we want to put new information into the database. And on this one, we want to patch certain parts of the data in the database. So we've got two different approaches. You can patch certain parts of the data. You're patching the status, patching the priority, or you're just putting a whole bunch of new information in. You don't care about the specifics. It's just, here's the data, and there we go. And the way that I'm going to be integrating with this is that I'll be getting these tasks as objects on my CLI or in Raycasts or in my website. I'll be having an object. I'll update that through reactive properties. Then I'll be doing a put request with that object. So I'm going to be passing that entire object across to be put into the database. Now, if it was like a form where when I finish typing and on blur, when that stops being focused, I could just patch that one specific input quite easily, but that isn't the approach I'm taking. So I will be going through and just doing a put request. So I can do a put request called update. This is going to go to a specific task. I don't like to use that though, but I do like to just pass it as a ULID. I've got my own reasonings. I'm just going to call this update controller quickly. So I could do root model binding, or I could just pass through it as a string. I like to pass it through as a string because it works better for me. And with my workflow, I don't want a model to then have to pass into a service or to pass into a command. I want to go, okay, give me just something small and quick. String, got it, cool. Does this exist? Yes or no? If it does exist, cool. Pass this off to the background to update. My update requests are pretty much always dispatchable, because the way that integrations typically work is that in a website, for example, we're probably going to build an SPA or some description that's going to integrate with this API. What we will do, we will have a page. It will use some sort of async data fetching to get a list of my tasks. Got my tasks, great. Here, I'm going to go into a specific task that I've got in state. I'm going to update that and push that up. I'm then going to redirect back to that index page where I'm going to refetch my tasks. So I don't need to return anything to pass it to update my state, to go back to the index page to refetch my state, because I'm guaranteed to refetch that state. And as long as I've got priority queues, that write will have finished by the time that next request comes through to get my list of tasks. So it's almost like a mini optimization of, I know how my integrations should be working. Now let's make another task here, blah, blah, blah. That's all good. We can actually use that same request. We don't actually need a new form object, new form request. So we just go public function invoke, store request. This is going to return a responsible. So again, at this point, we know we've got a valid payload. We want to dispatch updating task. Means we want to get the string for the ULID. Does this task list dispatch updating the task and respond? So the first thing, if task query exists, where ID is ULID. So if it doesn't exist, you can just do a very quick throw new model not found exception. The message is going to be no task found for ID ULID. Now I could put that in one big string. No task found for ULID. Code status not found. Done. Nice and clean, nice and simple. Now we want to dispatch. So we want to say make a job. Inside of our jobs, we're going to have tasks, v1, update job. Done. Now, up here, we can use public function instruct, private, read only, pending job, pending dispatch as a dispatch. Then when we're dispatching here, we can just say this dispatch. Actually, wait 2 seconds. Dispatch. This is what I need. This is going to return pending dispatch, which we then pass that job through. Is that how I want to do it? No, I'm going to ignore that. There's a way I do it. I can't remember off the top of my head. So we're just going to dispatch a new update job. The payload is going to be the request payload. And then we're going to respond in a second. So updating a job. Here we can go like this. Put this all down, be PSR 12 because standards. Again, there's a difference between standards and language constraints in my eyes. I had this conversation yesterday, quite interesting. So we're going to pass through public, read only. We're going to have a new task being passed through as the payload. So if we come back to here, that is now fine. We'll fill in that logic in a second. Let's just focus on responding. So in our responses, v1, we're going to have a message response. This is going to implement responsible. It's going to use as response. And in our constructor, we're going to have a protected read-only array for the data and a protected read-only status for the status where the status is okay. And this here, we want this array to have an array shape where the message is a string. That's it. So we care about there. Status, it's okay. Never read, only written. Yeah, not a problem. Let's protect it again. So over in our update controller, return a new message response. The data is an array. And the message is going to be, we are processing your request. Status, the status. You can drop that pending dispatch there. Update, that's all good. That is going to do that. That will handle that. At this point, we want to pull in the task service as a service. And we just want to go through and say service update this payload. What we're also going to do is public read-only string as the task. We're going to want to identify it. So we can say that the ID is this task and the payload is this payload. So we can come over here and we can say public function update. We're going to have a string as a task and a new payload, a new task payload. This should return bool at this point. Create our command. We can say update task, public function construct, private read-only database manager of database, public function handle, string, task, new payload, new task as payload, bool, return this database transaction where the callback is going to be task query where ID is task update and twice. So we're going to say where we find the task, we want to then update it. And the fields we want to be able to update is task title. Don't want to change the category. Maybe we would. Maybe I'll pass in a category 2. That could be the case. This will say string category. Status. Payload status. IRD payload priority, and the completed or complete at payload completed. I think that's the only thing we'd want to be able to update. Update returns an int, which we can cast to a bool. Make sure that we are returning correctly, so that when we are calling this, things are working as expected. Only back to our task service. Private update task is update task, or just update. Turn this update. Handle. The task is a task passed in. The category is this great category, where the name is payload category. The user will also need to be passed in. Here, user ID, and the payload is the payload. There's that. Make sure we are doing this all correctly. Update that doc. That is fine. All of this is now fine. Update job. We need to also get the user. So when we have the update controller, we also want to get that authenticated user. Public function construct private read only factory for the auth. Update job. We want to also pass in the task ULID. Also then going to want to pass in the user as this auth guard ID. So we can say public read only string user. That should then allow us to say that our user is this user. Update task. That could potentially fail. We want our exception handler to manage that. And we are good. All of that works. That is fine. Update controller is doing what I would want it to now. Let's just add some doc blocks. Do that. Then model not found. Return those throwable. This needs to be cast to a string. Message response. So let's test updating. Duplicate this. Update a task. We are doing a put request with a JSON body, and we want the title. We go through this first one here. Title to be updated. Category field is required. Okay, so we've got to pass the whole thing back. category is going to be new. Not null constraint failed. Status is open. Priority also needs to be passed through too. Low. There we go. Then when we get this one should now have updated, and that should stay the same. Updated, low, open, done. Perfect. All of that is done and working, so I can now go ahead and push this. So git add, git commit, updating and creating tasks through a service, git push. We can go have a look and make sure this has come through. And we're good. So again, this is a repo. I'm going to drop it in the chat. And I'm also going to show it on the screen. Our code is up. Tomorrow, we are going to look at integrating with this. We can log in, we can register, we can list our tasks, create a task and update a task. The rest is simply UI stuff for now. It's not a full API, but it's an API that we can start with. So for now, I'm going to call it a day, hour and 20 minutes. Not too bad. Go ahead and have a look at the repo, see what you want to do, clone it, fork it, drop issues if you want to see something specific on it. I'm going to start the CLI or Raycast extension tomorrow. Drop a like, drop a comment. If you want to see, let me know what you want to see. Do you want to see a Raycast extension using TypeScript? Do you want to see a CLI application? If so, do you want it in PHP? Do you want it in TypeScript, JavaScript? Do you want it in Go? Maybe, maybe we want to create a Go implementation. Who knows? Let me know what you want to see. Make sure you like, drop a comment, subscribe if you want to be notified about the next videos. I'm going to be live streaming regularly now. The plan is to do every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday live stream, maybe on this channel, maybe on my own channel. I'm looking at the strategy for that. See what's going to be best to where to put what content. So let me know. Thank you for tuning in. Stay awesome. Have a great day. See you later.